From my very first book, God's Brilliant Plan, Searching for the Easy and Light Life Jesus Promised, to my latest book, Simple Bible, I have made a big issue out of this idea that the right directions will lead you to the wrong destination if you do not start from the right starting point. So if I say, hey, I'm going to invite you over to my house. Come on over to my house for dinner. And you say, great, I don't know where your house is. Can you send me directions? So I send you directions. The problem is, I assume that you are starting from your house. So my directions might say something like, go out of your drive and turn left, go 2.5 miles to such and such a street, turn right, and so on and so forth. However, just before you come to my house, you decide that you need to run to the store and get something, so you go to the store. Then in the store parking lot, you pull out the directions which say, go out and turn right, drive 2.5 miles, then turn left. If you follow those directions as I gave them to you, they were the right directions when I gave them to you, but they will not take you to my house because you're not starting from the right starting point. Now, I want to suggest that ultimately the right starting point is probably John 3:16. God loves the world so much that he sent his son, not to condemn the world, but to offer everlasting life in the family, in the Father's family. I think that ultimately is where he started with Nicodemus, who was an expert in the law but could not comprehend what Jesus was all about. However, we can actually start where our Bible starts, and that's in the book of Genesis. And when we read the story of Adam and Eve, so often it comes across like this. God gave Adam and Eve a choice. They chose to deliberately disobey. And out of God's anger, he cursed them. And out of his anger, he kicked them out of the garden. Well, I want to suggest that that's not the way the story unfolds at all. God does indeed give them a choice. We can argue about predestination, but I'm a choice guy to some extent. God gave them a choice. They chose to trust in themselves and in their own knowledge, quote unquote, of good and evil, instead of trusting in God and trusting him. When the serpent showed up, Eve could have immediately said, wait a minute, let me get Adam and let's hear this. And then Adam could have easily said, Father, we need you to give us insight about what this serpent is saying. Even after he ate and his eyes were open, or they ate and their eyes were open, they could have immediately cried out, Father, come help us, we've messed up. But instead, you know what they did? They hid. God knew where they were, and he invited them to come back to him. Adam, where are you? You ought to be here when I show up. If you've read much of my stuff, you've heard me talk about this or read what I've written about this before. But here's what I want to bring us to in this issue. Where do we start with God and how he feels about sinners? How does he feel about those who have chosen to be the Lord of their own life? Well, one thing is that God saw that Adam and Eve were now ashamed. In their minds, they were ashamed because they were naked. Of course, they had been naked the whole time. They were created naked. But suddenly, they're so aware of themselves and they're unaware now of God and who he is. So what does God do? God does not say, well, you dummies, there's animals around here. Instead of using leaves that crumble and dry up and crumble in a day or two, why don't you kill an animal? He doesn't do that. What he does is he kills the animal. He makes their clothing and he clothes them. Wow, what a picture of the new covenant. He saves us, forgives us. He empowers us by Christ living inside of us. He sanctifies us. What a picture of the new covenant. But the last and final thing that I want you to understand is this. I have said in early years, and I've heard it said many times, God got angry because of their sin, and he kicked them out of the garden as punishment. And I just want to say that is absolutely not true at all. God put them out of the garden because he loved them so much. You say, well, wait a minute, Mark, how in the world can you say that? He put them out of paradise. Okay, but listen to this. This is the last verse of chapter 3. This is the end of this story, this starting place. Verse 24, chapter 3 of Genesis. After sending them out, the Lord God stationed a mighty cherubim to the east of the Garden of Eden, and he placed a flaming sword that flashed back and forth. Man, that's big time scary. But listen to the end. To guard the way to the tree of life. Now, I want you to think about that for a minute. God put them out of the garden. Absolutely. They were put out of paradise. Absolutely. And they were not allowed back in. There was a cherubim, a mighty angel with a flashing sword to make sure that they didn't get back into the garden. No. To make sure that they could not get back and eat of the tree of life. That was a gift of love. Why? Because God did not want Adam and Eve to live eternally in their sin and out of relationship with him. God did not want them to eternally be excluded from his family. So he kept them from eating from the tree of life. And in the book of Revelation, the tree of life shows up again in the fullness of God's kingdom that has now come down on the earth in the end of Revelation, and we all eat of the tree of life. Start in this place. God loved them so much. He wanted to ensure that they had a way to get back to him and be in his family forever. He feels the same way about me. He feels the same way about you. This is what grace life is all about.